Israel, the Zionist occupation, they've been bragging, okay, that they've been able to inoculate, vaccinate their population faster and in larger numbers than any other place, right? So the caveat here, yes, the caveat is that when they say that, when they say, look, we've inoculated so many people at breathtaking speeds, they're not counting the Palestinians, are they? Right? They're leaving that out. And so what's been happening now, we started hearing about this already last month in January, and it's been more and more widely reported in the media. But the Israelis, they've been countering this claim by saying, oh, it's anti-Semitic. And they've been countering this claim by saying that's not true. We don't discriminate with who we vaccinate. And they've been countering also by saying, well, even if we did, it doesn't matter because it's not our obligation to vaccinate Palestinians. All right. They say like Palestinians are on their own. They're responsible for their own health affairs because of the Oslo Accords. So let's break this down. Right. And I wanted to cover this already before, but, we sort of we've got a little a story here, part of this. So on SNL, on Saturday Night Live, they did a skit about this. They made a joke about what I've just explained to you and about the COVID-19 vaccine. And I'm going to play you the clip. Okay, here's the skit. You ready? Ready for a little humor? It's just 8 seconds.
Israel is reporting that they vaccinated half of their population. And I'm going to guess it's the Jewish half. Israel.
That's it. That's a joke. And so, here we have Erdogan, right? So he's Israel's ambassador to the US and the UN. Look what he says. He says, I'm a big fan of humor, but perpetuating anti-Semitism is just not funny. Your joke is ignorant. The fact is that the success of our vaccination drive is exactly because every citizen of Israel, Jewish, Muslim, Christian, is entitled to it. Apologize. So he wants SNL to apologize. And, if you go and look at Danny Dunnan as well, who is also the permanent representative of Israel to the United Nations. You remember he's the guy who came to the General Assembly with a Bible and he said, look, we have biblical rights to the West Bank. Like, okay, man, I get it, but like you're also at the UN and, this is not an international law. Anyway, dude, that guy was also losing it in a similar fashion. He was also saying, oh, this is anti-Semitism and it's not true. And, it's like they're trying to say 2-3 arguments at the same time, right? Like, no, it's not true. But if it is true, we don't have any responsibility towards the Palestinians. Which one is it? So let's break this down, shall we? Let's break this down. Here he is again, Ambassador Erdogan, right? Whose statement we just saw about SNL. Look what he says on January 26th. He says, according to international agreements, the Palestinian Authority, the PA, right, which is responsible for the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority is responsible for the healthcare of its own population. They informed Israel they intend to purchase vaccines from Russia, and Israel will facilitate that. Okay, you read that? What does it say here? Israel will facilitate that. Yeah, it turns out they didn't. Okay. Israel blocks shipment of Russian Sputnik vaccine to Gaza. I mean, okay, you're going to come now and tell me, well, look, he was just talking about the PA. He was just talking about, the West Bank. He wasn't talking about Gaza. They're still Palestinians, okay? Blocking a shipment of vaccines. I mean, this is, if everything I just told you was not true, now it's true, right? You can't come and say, oh, Israel has nothing to do with this. You're independent. Do what you want. Palestinians are responsible for their own health affairs. Oh, but by the way, we're going to block the vaccine. No, hold on a second. Either Palestinians have full autonomy and they can bring in whatever supplies they want and they can bring in whatever medication they want because they're a country, or they're not because you're standing in the way, right? If I park a tank outside your house, yes, a tank, right? With machine guns. I got soldiers with me. I park a tank out in your driveway and I tell you, look, man, you're free to leave anytime you like. Go. No, you're free to leave. What are you talking about? No, don't talk about my tank. My tank has nothing to do with you. You're free to leave it whenever you want. But if you come out the house, I'm going to blast you. What? No, you're not giving Palestinians autonomy with their health affairs and citing the Oslo Accords and then at the same time blocking them from bringing in their vaccines. Now, keep in mind, this dose over here, this was just a few vials, right? So you have to keep in mind, if you have, for example, 1,000 doses, each person needs 2 shots. So that's enough for 500 people. 1,000 doses, 2 shots per person means 500 people. And so here they stopped 1,000 doses of Russia's Sputnik 5 COVID vaccine, right? These were intended for frontline medical workers. Now, keep in mind something over here, all right? Keep in mind something. They say over here that an Israeli official said allowing the vaccine shipment through was still being debated late Monday, okay? It wasn't blocked, quote, it wasn't blocked. They are still contemplating it, unquote, the official said, speaking on condition of anonymity. Yeah, okay, you're perhaps contemplating it, but you still blocked the goddamn shipment. What do you mean? Did it go through or it did not go through? It's not, you know, it's one or the other. It's one or the other. And so they were trying to say, look, these vaccines, they're going to go to senior Hamas officials. Yeah, okay, but you just told us that Palestinians are responsible for their own affairs. So, I mean, whether they distribute it to Hamas officials or they distribute, I see Hamas, it's Hamas. Whether they distribute it to Hamas officials or they distribute it to a bunch of grandmothers is not your business, because you just told us that Palestinians have full autonomy, right? What did the ambassador what did the Israeli ambassador say over here? He said, Israel would facilitate that. You fucking lied. This is not facilitating anything. You're blocking the fucking vaccine from getting in. What are you talking about? So anyway, this ended up going in, but you can see here that this is for political reasons, right? And what a small dose as well. But keep in mind, you might be thinking, yeah, it's just 1,000 vials. Yeah, but Palestinians, they barely have enough to begin with. Do you understand? They don't have anywhere near enough. Never mind compared to Israel. And so I want to read you this little passage over here. I want to read you this little passage from Médecins Sans Frontières, so Doctors Without Borders. Okay, and this was written by Matthias Kennis. I hope I'm saying his name correctly. So he wrote this 2 days ago, right? And he says, as a medic, I'm shocked. The internationally acclaimed COVID-19 vaccination success of Israel has a dark side, the consequences of which are being felt cruelly in the West Bank territory of Palestine, where I work, and in the blockaded Gaza Strip, where my Médecins Sans Frontières colleagues work. So you have to remember, if you watch, for example, Abby Martin's film, Gaza Fights for Freedom, or, you've just been following what's happening in Gaza. Gaza is under siege, both by Israel and Egypt. Israel controls and tells the Palestinians what they're allowed to bring into Gaza, right? So this is not just about COVID vaccines. This is also about cement, right? After they destroyed all these homes, people can't rebuild. They're still living in rubble. I mean, it's horrendous, right? So Israel has managed to vaccinate nearly 4.2 million people with a first dose. That's around 50% of the population, and 2.8 million people with the full 2 doses. That's more than 30% of the population. Meanwhile, only several thousand doses are available in the Palestinian West Bank, and the delivery of 20,000 reported to have arrived last weekend in Gaza scarcely scratches at the surface of the needs. At a generous maximum, assuming that the 35,000 reported Sputnik and Moderna vaccines are all available, that will be around 0.8% of the Palestinian population. To make that clearer, you are over 60 times more likely to have a vaccination in Israel than in Palestine. Israel has a responsibility as an occupying power to ensure the medical supplies of the occupied people, including, quote, adoption and application of the prophylactic and preventative measures necessary to combat the spread of contagious diseases and epidemics to the fullest extent of the means available to it. So I posted this a while back, right? I posted this on Twitter, Article 56 from the Geneva Convention. So you can see here, it clearly spells out that when there's an occupation, a military occupation, the occupier has a responsibility to vaccinate, to provide medical assistance and services and infrastructure to the people that they're occupying. And so for the Israelis to come and say, well, look, the Oslo Accords give Palestinians full autonomy. No, that doesn't alleviate you from this. You are occupying Palestine. I mean, this is, it's not you're not half occupying it. No, you're occupying it. You're occupying the West Bank. You're occupying East Jerusalem. You're occupying Gaza. You're also occupying the Syrian Golan Heights. Yeah. So That's a fact. You are occupying those lands. You are occupying Palestinian land illegally under numerous UN Security Council resolutions. You have a responsibility towards the Palestinians. I wish this were the most egregious affront on the Palestinians. I wish. Right? If this was all they've ever done to the Palestinians, whew, you know, this pales in comparison to the bombings, to the wars, the siege in general. I mean, it's just right. So this is just another brick in the wall. This is a continuation of what we already know. So just to continue over here, just to go back to the letter from Matthias. Right, he says that a few kilometers away in Israel, all the vulnerable groups have been vaccinated. And they are planning to move on to vaccinating healthy adults and youths who are less vulnerable, especially to severe complications. Here in the West Bank, there are around 10,000 doses, which is enough for 5,000 people to be vaccinated. In the hospital where I work, staff have been offered the vaccine, but the available doses do not come close to covering the healthcare workers, let alone the elderly and people with medical conditions that make them susceptible to dying of COVID-19. If asked why vulnerable people cannot be vaccinated in Palestine, I do not know how to answer. It is inexplicable and unbelievable. Worse than that, it is unjust and cruel. We hear information about additional vaccines coming to Palestine from various donation mechanisms, but they are not here now. And a half-hour drive away, Israel has piles of vaccines and is moving on to vaccinating non-vulnerable groups, right? So once again, I mean, just from a diplomatic point of view, usually, you know, ideally, in such a situation, you know, one country which is already vaccinated, or let's just say cared for or tended to in any sort of situation, not just a vaccine, but just a disaster relief, whatever. A nation that has already tended to the most vulnerable would perhaps offer assistance to neighboring countries, right? No, Israel is not only neglecting its and abdicating its responsibility as an occupying power. It's like, yo, screw you. We're going to go and vaccinate the people that are not even they're not even the most vulnerable or at high risk of dying from COVID or whatever. So I mean, this is just what do you call this? What do you call this, man? What do you call this kind of behavior? It's shameful. It's preposterous, right? And this idea that, oh, well, the Palestinians, they didn't ask us for any help. They're saying that, right? Israeli officials are saying that. The PA have not asked us for any vaccines. Really? Well, even when they try to buy them, you stop them from coming in. So, I mean, what is that? What is that? And I just want to make you understand something, because you know, this is, as I said, it's a part of a larger, broader scheme of behavior from the Israeli occupation to the Palestinians. I mean, this is not something that just started now, okay? As I told you, there's a siege on Gaza alone that's been going on since, 2014, right? So you had Operation Cast-Led in 2009, and then in 2014 you had Operation Protective Edge, and I mean, they just bombed the crap out of Gaza. It's in ruins. They can't even import concrete. They can't even import cement. They can't even import building supplies. It's just horrendous. No construction supplies. Israel controls everything that goes in, and this is going back several years, right, before there was any coronavirus. So it's not just confined to this. And just to give you some other examples, this article over here, this is from 2010, right? World Health Organization says medical supplies blocked from entering Gaza. The WHO says Israel is blocking vital medical supplies from entering the Gaza Strip. The UN agency says it is impossible to maintain a well-functioning health system if necessary supplies are not available. Right? They're not letting in necessary medical equipment, spare parts, and repair crews to enter the Gaza Strip. This goes back decades, man. This goes back decades. Right? Here, this is from Human Rights Watch from 1996, and there's the same in the Los Angeles Times. I don't know if you can see the logo at the top, but this is from the Los Angeles Times. Also, it's just about the same topic in 1996 when they had a closure, right? So, faced with the rapidly deteriorating economic and healthcare conditions in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, Israel took steps Sunday to slightly ease the strict closure it imposed on March 3rd. So, you know, Israel is randomly, arbitrarily, on a whim deciding what is allowed into the occupied Palestinian territories, who is allowed in and out of the occupied Palestinian territories. They control everything. So you can't come here and then say like, oh, we got nothing to do with that. How does that work? Palestine is independent when you want them to be independent, and then when it doesn't suit you, they're not, right? So just a few weeks ago with the ICC, with the International Criminal Court saying they were extending their jurisdiction to the occupied Palestinian territories, the Israelis are saying, oh no, you can't do that because Palestine is not a state under international law. But when it comes to the COVID vaccines, oh, Palestine has full autonomy with their health infrastructure, and we have nothing to do with that. But we're going to block their vaccines from coming in. What the fuck? make it make sense. Make it make sense. This is hypocrisy of the highest order. And then they got the nerve to ask SNL to apologize over a skit. No, you apologize for withholding vaccines from the Palestinians and hoarding all of it to yourselves. You don't even fucking need them. This is unbelievable. They've inoculated their most vulnerable, right? And now they're moving on to the non-vulnerable groups and just abandoning the Palestinians. And again, I wish this were the most minor of affronts on the Palestinian people. I wish, but it's horrendous, right? It's horrendous. And again, this goes back decades. And the reason that they're pushing back on this and claiming, oh, it's fake news. And even if it is true, we don't have any responsibility towards the Palestinians. The reason they're doing this is because they don't want you to understand that Israel is an apartheid regime. They don't want you to understand that Palestine is under occupation. They can't have you understand that, right? They don't want people to understand that because the whole shtick, right? The whole cover story is that, Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, right? That's their slogan. Really? Are you sure? You can't really be a democracy when you neglect to treat Palestinians the same way you treat the rest of your citizens, right? I mean, you got about, 1.8 million Palestinians living inside of what you call what they call the state of Israel. And I mean, they have separate laws for Palestinians, for fuck's sake, right? You got zones A, B, and C when it comes to the West Bank. Gaza is under siege. Like, who are you kidding? But of course, they're not going to tell you that in the mainstream media. They can't have you understand that it's completely asymmetrical. I mean, Israel has complete, total dominance over the Palestinians. By land, by air, by sea, by everything that goes in and out, by who goes in and out, complete dominance. But yet they want you to believe that Israel is innocent and, Palestinians, oh no, they're just foolish and they're just corrupt and they're just terrorists and they can't do anything. Really? Incredible. Incredible how it's always the fucking Palestinians, right? It's never the Israelis who are doing something wrong. Unbelievable. Crazy. What astronomical odds. You got some real fucking good math going on there. I mean, even in the face of a pandemic, right? They're still pulling the same old nonsense, right? It never changes. What do you expect? Once again, if you compare this to the war in 2014, you compare this to 70 years going back to 1948, 70 years of occupation. This is just business as usual, unfortunately. That's what it is.